Hello, so in the first tutorial we looked at live patching here, and now we're going to look at using stills. So you can do a lot with this, and it's very kind of forgiving, a very good technique to get your head around. So where you get the still from, that's beg, borrowing and stealing really. So sometimes they've shot a clean piece, you can grab that from somewhere, or more often than not you're painting up by cloning. You're removing the offending object on the still, or you're collaging together bits from other frames in the clip. So it's very kind of, a bit of an ingenuity to find the clean area, but because it's a still, you can usually work with just creating one frame. So it come in from the clip, so you'll have grain. There'll be moving grain in the in the still that you work on, and that has to be removed, because otherwise, if you don't do that, you end up with very horrible blobby bits of static grain in a part of the shot. And for high-end feature film work on the big screen, you'll see those big blobby bits. So static grain's an issue, so we have to denoise or degrain the still first, and that's important to do that before we do any painting. When we later on get to more intricate paint work, it's the same. Any paint work that you do, you'd always degrain. So it's a big issue really. And then when that still is fitted exactly into the shot and all the edges are restored, things like actors that are coming in front of the clean piece, that then has to be regrained. So your patch is usually tracked if the camera's moving in, or it sits to move in sync with a plate so that it's invisible, and then you're having to put the grain back at the end. So the first issue with stills is always getting rid of the grain. So I've put it in big capitals here, so you always have to remove the grain first. So I've just come up to suggest here 3 different ways of doing it. So you've got like a matrix filter that basically averages together blocks of 6 by 6 pixels, and this routine, the numbers that are in here are preset. So this I know is just a good recipe for degraining footage, where you have these same numbers in there. So that's just plug and play really, and it does take effect. On some shots it probably or possibly will soften the picture a bit, and that's the big seesaw act that you're dealing with degraining, is to keep the image detail but lose the noise. So here it's softening the picture a little bit, so maybe not ideal. Talaran does a really good explanation and talks about the theory of how this matrix is working when he's taking you through his VFX 201 course. Towards the end, I think it's something like week 7, 8, 9, it's all about filters, and this is really well covered, this with Tal. So not so good for this shot. Frame blending, that's interesting. That's where you're literally averaging together a bunch of the frames so that you keep anything that's not really moving in the shot, but anything that's moving different frame to frame, it averages it out. So it's a really good one. It's a really clean way of working, in that it keeps things like the trees. You'll be able to, we'll be able to demonstrate to you the effect that it's having, because it kind of smudges, blurs the train. So as that train's moving, all of those frames have been averaged together, so it doesn't work for anything that's moving. It's that's a problem. But for grain it's perfect, because grain moves so much frame to frame, it gets rid pretty well. So if you look in the blue channel there, look, then that's done a good job. That's kept the image detail without softening. But if you look particularly in the blue channel, let's remove the grain. So that's a good one. And then the kind of foundry one that used to be with Furnace, it used to come with these plugins here, as in it was called FD Noise, has been put in the standard tool set, but only with Nuke X. So that's a kind of slight drawback. If you're on the standard Nuke, you won't have access to edit this denoise tool. It's a good one. It's using really fancy optical flow to do the job. And as well as it being a Nuke X thing, the other drawback is, let's have a look. My overlays are off, so put my overlays back on. Yeah, so it's this box that you're having to put onto the image to take a sample, literally, so it sees the grain in order to remove it. And you'll see it comes up with a little warning if this isn't big enough, so it needs it to be at least 80 by 80 pixels. For this shot, it's a little bit of a problem because there isn't anything flat that's that size, really. You know, it's tricky to get a flat area without it being tree or without it being train or hill or, you know, detail. So detail that's actually photographed, you don't really want to show it too much of that, because it will use that and remove, it'll remove too much from the image. So good on blue screens, green screens and stuff, because they're, you know, flat. You've got good kind of just a flat area that you can put it on. But there's not too much in this. I've tended to shove it at the back there on these trees. And I keep going and keep going and keep going. There we go. It sees that it's just big enough. Doesn't care too much how wide it is, as long as it's that, you know, as long as it's bigger than the 80 by 80. So I have to stretch it up, and then it's sampling from this area. So it's not ideal in that it has got some treetops in there, but there's nothing else I can do, so I have to go with that. So it may be interesting to compare these two. To see which is best. So for me, it's quite good, really. The frame blend's a lot cheaper. You know, it's just averaging, taking the frames that I've fed it, and literally 25 I've put in there. I'd say it needs around about 12 to 25, and then it does the averaging thing. Some people, I've heard, they call this compounding. So that sort of, you have to have a static enough shot to feed into it, and then it sort of averages together the frames, and it's mainly this is mainly used for degraining, actually. You know, its main frame blend is a really cheap retiming operator that potentially could give you you know, lengthen your clip, but it always ends up being softening everything. So its main use is degraining, really. So that it's working really well. People sometimes camera track or sorry, just track something to stabilize it and then feed it into this if you've got too much movement. But that I think is the best one. So I've just offered a choice of 3 there for you to look at, but you'll have to get used to using and trying these and coming up, figuring out which is the best one and using it to get rid of the noise off your still. So what I'm going to use for this, what my sort of plan of attack when I do the comp work down here is to use two stills really, and paint one on top of t'other, or comp one on top of t'other. So it's you got a bit of choice there. If you like painting, you can kind of reveal brush from one frame onto another, or it could just be like a little roto job. But this is important to remember, that at this stage the thing that we're going to do next isn't anything to do with the moving clip. It's not live, so you're not patching with anything that's kind of the moving plate. You're just literally taking a still. So if you think further ahead with that, you could just use Photoshop. You could put stills together and paint clone, you know, in Photoshop, as you would be if you were working in print or still photography. So that's, I guess, why this is good, in that it's kind of a Photoshop thing. So we're really just about doing the Photoshop thing for this next bit. So I need to take two sources now. All that's done is denoise, so I need to kind of tell it that I want two still frames. So you've got in the retiming options, sorry, there, the clock, we're just literally wanting a frame hold, and we want one to frame hold the beginning of the shot. If I go back to colour, you'll see just at the head of the shot there. So if I tell it to frame hold on one, then you'll see the difference. So that's where it's blending 25 bunches of sections of 25 frames as it goes. Look, that's just for denoise. I could actually write on there what it's for, so it makes a bit more sense. Denoise. And then this frame hold is put on underneath on another branch, just to hold one all the way throughout the clip. Look, so if I look at that point, then that's just frame one static. So that gets rid of most of the van, but it's still visible. Just the top of the van is visible there. Look. So how can I deal with that? Well, I could clone brush, you know, literally paint from this area and just paint on top. Because as I said, I'm just like using Nuke as if it was Photoshop really. But rather than doing that, I just fancy doing something a slightly bit more clever. And I guess it's good to show you this because it's something that will, you know, hold you in good stead for doing like lots of cleanup work. And it's just taking a frame, or taking a little piece from further up, any of those frames towards the end, literally where the van's moved from that initial position. And there isn't any, check that there isn't any steam from the steam train in the way, but any of those frames there at the end, that'll be good just to have a little piece where the van isn't. If you remember on that first frame, the van's there, and it's just nice trees, so there's no van there now. So I want to paint this little section just to cover up that on the first frame. So I can make a nice script where everything's visible, and I can use these operators to really make this human readable, so everything's clear. That's clear in that it's telling me it's holding frame one. And then here I just want to take another one of those and hold it on frame 135. It could be really any of these at the end, so I'll go with 135. Just type that in there, and then that holds. So that's holding one frame, holding 135 there. Look, so if I look between them, that's one. There's the van, and that's 135, and there is the van isn't there. can't see it. So the idea is, using these frames, I'm going to paint onto this frame from this frame, therefore removing the van. So it's just kind of thinking, being a bit nifty about, you know, taking pieces from different frames or different places and just painting them together. It's just clever collaging, really, that's taking advantage of, you know, if somebody's shot a sequence, they're going to have a lot of stills, really, that you can work together to get, you know, make a really good clean source without the thing there, and then you can track that in to finish the cleanup. So that's what we're going to do. It's kind of good often, once you've done all this, you know, patching work, painting or kind of collaging, to render off the result, so that you've not got live paint strokes or you know, too much going on. You always think about breaking down a job into stages where you can pre-render a bunch of work, and then use the result, you know, bring in the render again and work with that, and it just makes your scripts much more interactive. You know, they're quicker to render, quicker to look at and work with. So I would do that. I could probably do that here. So just to show you, there's a couple of ways that you could think about doing that, and it's not any great shakes between the two. It just depends what you fancy doing, really. So first way is with can remember my quick keys. P for paint, that's it. First way is just with a little bit of painting. So I can't really avoid showing you this because it's quite handy. So the thing that you wanted to paint onto goes into the background, this BG input as it's labelled, and then the thing that you're wanting to paint from, so we're literally wanting to clone out that van where it's on frame 1, I'm going to put, not in mask, I'm going to put into BG1. Always good to employ the dots to make things come in at right angles. So there we are. So that is wired up correctly. I just need to make sure I'm looking at it, and then it gives me access to the reveal brush. Rather than cloning from the same frame, I'm revealing. If I go to reveal, it lets me paint from another input. Whee! That's what I want. Job done. So that's done it. That's done it through painting eventually. So just painting in that area then paints back to 135. So I get cleanup. That's what I want. What you have to remember with Nuke is that the frame that you've painted on is only going to be, there's only going to be paint strokes on that one look. If I go in time to another frame, I lose the paint strokes. You can change this to begin with, but again, it's easy to forget. So afterwards you can go here, look, and it tells you the frame that it's painted onto, and you can say you want that to be all frames. The other way around that is that because you render out, you could just render frame 135, and then when you bring that in again, it isn't an issue. You know, the single frame will last forever, but it's quite often a good, well, it's a bit of, again, a gotcha that there, you know, you see paint strokes that are only on for wherever you've painted them in time. So you have to click and say, you know, last forever, so it all frames. That's that done. So that's just Photoshop work, really. It's a bit of a sort of Nuke setup that looks a bit much, but all you're doing is you're just taking two stills and you're cleaning up the problem that's on one with another. So in this case, if you think through it, you know, you've got just the van coming up just a little bit on frame 1, so then it moves across, and then it's from here you can get rid of that first you know, where you first see it. So that's that done. So the other way of doing this is just through comping, really. So you can kind of take a bit and just roto a little piece across. So see if I can make this nice elegant script. So that's the paint way look, and if I do it the roto way, I would be just taking looking at and drawing for where I want to get rid. So if I look here and double clicking on there means I can draw, but on, you know, onto here. So because I'm looking there, double clicked here, tools allow me to draw for there rather than for here. So you always look at what you're trying to get rid of and make sure you have the roto controls up by double clicking, and then it lets you draw for that thing that you're looking at. So now just doing a little shape like that. Z in Nuke with Beziers lets you pull out handles so you get curves. If you don't want the handles, you can do Shift Z and then you get, you know, the straight edges. The vertices are just corners. With, if you press Z, you have handles so that they become curved. So something like that, you know, is enough. Just a little blob. So that then, guess what? It needs to be pre-multiplied, so it tells it to cut out. And you get that, and then the usual thing, you just put in front over back, gives you that. So, you know, you could work that way, and it's the same thing. I would say that you've done, you've made the kind of clean still by compositing this way, literally creating an alpha channel, cutting the colors out here by the alpha channel, and then layering. Or you could do it through painting. It doesn't matter which, to be honest, because what we're going to do next is render out, so literally write out the result of that. So it's all baked down. You don't have live paint strokes. If I render from that one, you know, you're gonna stop. Paint strokes can be quite heavy because you end up having quite a lot of them usually, and they slow everything down. So we're just gonna bake that down by literally rendering, or pre-rendering, most people would call this, because you're gonna take the result back into the script and work with it. So where's my van, my Kingdom for a Van output? It's on the desktop. I can never find anything on a Mac. There we go. Remove van. So create kind of maybe a stills directory, just keep everything neat. Clean van still. Version 01. I don't have to do the funny hash or %04D because I'm not rendering a sequence. I'm just rendering the one frame, so you don't need the syntax that gives you the number padding. You can go straight with the file name and then dot and the format, and we'll do this as a targa. So TGA is the extension to tell it to be that format, and I'm going to save that. And then not too concerned with any compression, so take compression off here. Color spaces, sRGB, so it's good to go, I think, just by putting in a file name there. And then we just want to hit render. It will only do the first frame because I haven't put the padding in, but you can tell it to render another frame, so 135, and that would be the thing to do if you've not bothered to edit the paint strokes so that they're everywhere. If you've only painted the paint strokes on frame 135, then in this place, if you render 135, you know, it will be that frame. When you bring that in again, that will last forever. So you can get out of dodge, get out of trouble by if your paint strokes are only on the one, not by doing that. So we're going to hit go, and it quickly renders that off. And then all of that can be done away with, really. I'm just going to save the script so that you have it, really. But you know, we're finished now because we're going to go on and bring that still in again. And comp with it. And rather than wasting time redrawing the rotor, I'm going to nick that one that I did earlier. In fact, don't need the transform, it's not, I'm not using that, but all the other bits I can just carry across. So this gives me the same little section. This time though it's a still. It does say on there, I might just make that really super clear so we know what we're, you know, we know which is which. So that's the clip, that's the still. This is going to cut out that still just exactly the same way as before when we did live patching. So you get that result at the pre-mult, and then you're just going to over that front, over, back. Okay, so that's working well, and it's really flexible. So working with stills is like the kind of done thing, you know, it's the everyman of doing rig removal work, really. But because it's a still and we've done all of that good denoising when we were working with stills here, right? So as a sort of a first thing we did was degrain. Now you have the joy of regraining. If you look at the repair, there's always going to be the blue channel that shows it. Look, there isn't any grain on there. There's nice filmy grain everywhere else, but not on the patch. So we've got a match grain. Now this could be a lesson all to itself, because grain matching is quite intricate when you're dealing with the, you know, sort of some of these big images. Like, you would do well to match the grain in different luma regions. Usually the highlights in the picture are grained slightly less than the darker shadow areas. So midtones and shadows are grained in through one matte, and then, or you use a luma key to control where the grains in the highlights is different from the midtones and the shadows. We haven't got time to do all of that, and because this is such a small patch, we'll get away with just doing an overall grain. Where you put the grain is kind of interesting. It could go at the bottom, and very often has to, but in this I would put it just in there before the pre-mult. You just have to be really careful with grain in where you're putting it, to be honest, because if I put the grain on top of there, it'll, in little specks, it will lift the black up. So that will, to some degree, affect, it'll show up in the comp, because it's actually, you're graining something that's pre-multiplied. The grain has a switch in it to get around that, which, sorry, grain, not grade, has a switch in it to get around that, which is just called apply only through alpha, and it's on by default at the bottom. But what I would do in this case, just to avoid that altogether, is to not be worrying about that. So I'd take it off, and I'd put the grain just on the colours. So if you think about, this is all affecting the alpha look. These two operations are actually, well, pre-mod's affecting the colour, but it's if I put the grain there, then it's before the alpha's put in. Here is before the alpha's put. I'll put it there before the alpha's put in altogether, so that would work. So then we're just doing a grain match, which can be, if you like, things that are forensic, can be quite interesting. So you're just looking at the thing all together, really. You're seeing the result of, that's how it looks so far. That's just using like a preset. The grain has a bunch of presets here, and so what I usually do is find the one that's closest. That usually entails having to go through them all. Good old Kodak 5218. That's pretty close. And then it's really important to go through each channel. Probably start with the blue. Blue's always heaviest grain, and then you're just tweaking it back. Mostly the size is really an important factor, so you've kind of got to get it quite sort of soft grain in the plate, but you've got to get it so that it looks similar. And then it's too intense, man, so you've got to take that back until it matches. So this is just all about tweaking and tweaking, so I'm gonna jump ahead, otherwise you don't really want to watch me noodling with this. But basically you do the blue channel and then the green, so you look at green and you you know, you'll be altering the green sliders, and then you look at red. I guess you would assume that the sliders are in a similar position, but they're not going to necessarily sit on top of each other because grain is different in each channel, so you would expect these to be a little bit, you know, offset from each other. And tweak the intensity. So you just do that by looking really hard in each channel and then tinkering with the sliders. Mainly size and intensity. How regular it is difficult to see on a still frame, so you better to make that assessment when the thing's on the run. So that's it for the second tutorial. Using and working a bit like an editor. Thanks.